The rancher caught the beautiful Apache climbing out of his window. He whispered, "Wrong room." Ethan Caldwell had lived on his ranch for nearly 30 years. The house, a sturdy, weathered structure of timber and stone, sat alone in the vast stretch of desert. The sun had long disappeared behind the mountains, leaving the landscape in shadows and moonlight. For most people, a quiet night like this would feel peaceful. But Ethan, used to the silence, knew that even the faintest sound could signal trouble. That was the life he had chosen. Lonely, but free. And he was content with it. He had just settled back into bed after a long day of tending the animals and checking fences. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and dust. A gentle wind whispered through the cracks of the old wooden window frames. Ethan was already halfway asleep when he heard it. A faint scraping sound, soft but deliberate, coming from the side of his bedroom window. His eye snapped open. At first he thought it might be a coyote, or maybe a branch brushing against the window. But something about the rhythm of the movement felt different, too precise, almost human. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, feeling the worn floorboards beneath his feet, and crept toward the window. The moonlight spilling across the room was enough to outline shapes but not to reveal details. Then he saw her. A figure, lithe and quick, was struggling slightly to climb out of the window. Her long dark hair fell across her face, and for a brief moment she paused, balancing on the ledge as if frozen in place. Ethan's heart thumped, not out of fear, but out of sheer disbelief. In all his years of living alone, he had never imagined that anyone, let alone a stranger, would attempt to leave his home in the dead of night. "Hey," he whispered, trying to keep his voice low. "Wrong room." The woman froze, her dark eyes lifted to meet his. There was no panic in them, only alertness, a kind of quiet defiance that made Ethan's pulse quicken. She didn't respond immediately, her breathing soft but steady. There was something strange about her, something that drew his attention even in that unexpected moment. She was beautiful, certainly, but not in the way of a passing glance. Her presence had a weight, a sense of purpose that demanded to be noticed. Ethan took a careful step closer to the window, resting his hand lightly on the sill. "I said wrong room," he repeated, softer this time. He was calm, but there was an edge to his voice. He wasn't angry exactly, but he was alert. Years of solitude had taught him how quickly a situation could turn dangerous. The woman hesitated, then finally spoke in broken English, her accent unfamiliar but clear. I am not, looking for someone else." Her words tumbled out, hurried and uncertain, as if she were used to explaining herself quickly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. She didn't sound like a criminal or a thief. Her voice was soft, yet carried a strength that surprised him. He studied her for a moment, trying to decide what to do. He could close the window, demand she leave, or call someone. But instinct told him something different. There was something in her expression, the way her eyes flicked around nervously, that made him pause. She wasn't here to cause harm. That much he could tell. "Come inside," he said finally, surprising even himself. The words were quiet, but firm. "If you're going to explain, you can do it from the inside, not dangling outside my window." For a moment she looked at him, hesitant. Then, with a slight nod, she eased herself over the sill and into the room. Her movements were careful, almost cat-like, but there was no denying the grace she carried with her. She landed lightly on the floor, her eyes never leaving his. Ethan noticed the dirt on her boots, the dust on her clothes, and realized she had been traveling, or running, from somewhere not too far from the desert. "Why here?" he asked quietly as he closed the window. The night air rushed in briefly before he latched to the latch securely. "Why my room? Why my house?" Mistake," she replied simply, her voice still soft, almost a whisper. She didn't elaborate, but her tone suggested urgency, perhaps even fear. Ethan's curiosity was piqued. She wasn't like anyone he had met before. Her presence seemed out of place, yet entirely natural. as if the desert itself had guided her to him. He gestured to the chair by the small writing desk. "Sit. Tell me slowly what's going on. I don't want to hurt you, but I do need to understand." She moved cautiously, settling onto the chair as if unsure she was allowed to rest. Her dark eyes studied him, sharp and calculating, as though deciding whether to trust him. Ethan noticed the faint lines around her eyes, the weariness of someone who had traveled far and faced difficulties he could only guess at. "I was looking for someone," she began again, her voice firmer this time. "Not you, not here. Wrong place, yes. Wrong room." She paused, glancing at the window, then back at Ethan. I need help." Ethan felt a strange mixture of caution and concern. He had spent years relying only on himself. Strangers were rare, and even rarer were strangers who arrived at his house in the middle of the night. Yet there was something about her that disarmed him. Perhaps it was the honesty in her eyes, or the vulnerability hidden beneath her confident exterior. Whatever it was, he couldn't simply turn her away. "All right," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Tell me what kind of help you need." "Start from the beginning." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. I am running. People, dangerous. They follow me. I cannot go home." Her words were fragmented but clear enough. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. Danger. Someone chasing her. It wasn't safe to stay outside, and clearly she had nowhere else to turn. The room was quiet after her words, except for the soft hum of the desert night. Outside, the wind moved the trees and carried the distant sound of coyotes. Inside, Ethan felt the weight of the unexpected turn his night had taken. He had gone to bed expecting nothing more than the usual quiet of the desert. Instead, he had found a stranger, a beautiful woman, and a problem he wasn't sure he was prepared to solve. "All right," he said again, more firmly. "You're safe here for now. We'll figure it out. But you have to trust me, and you have to tell me everything you know." She nodded slowly, relief flickering across her face. It was subtle, but he saw it. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir inside him, something beyond the usual calm solitude of ranch life. Curiosity, responsibility, something akin to hope. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew it was important, and somehow he had a feeling that the night was just beginning, and that this unexpected visitor was going to change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The moonlight shifted as clouds passed overhead, casting the room in moving shadows. Ethan moved to the small lamp on the desk, turning it on to fill the room with a soft golden glow. The woman looked around, her eyes catching every detail of the modest room. The bed, the worn furniture, the stacks of papers and tools that marked his life here. She seemed both out of place and entirely at home, a contradiction that fascinated him. "I'm Ethan," he said finally. "And you are?" "Naya," she whispered, the single name carrying a weight in history she didn't explain. But that was enough for now. For now, they were two strangers brought together by chance, by the quiet desert night, and by circumstances neither of them fully understood yet. Ethan sank into a chair across from her, watching her closely. The night stretched on, quiet except for the occasional rustle outside. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing. Nothing about this night, about Naya, would be ordinary. And somehow, he didn't want it to be. The room felt smaller now, charged with anticipation and unspoken questions. Ethan realized that the quiet life he had carefully built for himself was about to be disrupted, perhaps forever. And in that realization, there was both fear and a strange, unshakable excitement. The first night had begun. The stranger had arrived. And Ethan Caldwell, the solitary rancher, had no idea how deep this encounter would reach into his life, into the desert night, and into the story that was just beginning to unfold. The night outside the Caldwell ranch remained still, the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel louder. Ethan Caldwell had been awake for hours, listening to Naya as she tried to explain why she had come to his house in the middle of the night. Her English was broken but understandable, her words careful, measured, as if each one weighed heavily on her. She wasn't the type to speak freely. I follow... Not safe, she said finally, her voice low, almost a whisper. Her dark eyes looked at Ethan, searching, waiting. They know me. They want me back. I cannot go home. Too dangerous. Ethan leaned back in his chair, thinking. He had lived through storms, wild animals, and even thieves trying to sneak onto his land once or twice, but he had never dealt with someone running for their life. He studied Naya. She wasn't hiding anything. She looked tired, weary, but strong. There was a quiet courage in her that he respected. "All right," he said carefully. "You're safe here tonight. I won't let anyone hurt you while you're in my house. But we need to figure out a plan for tomorrow. You can't stay inside forever." Naya nodded, relief flickering in her expression. She took a deep breath, then glanced around the room. Thank you," she said softly. I run a long time, alone. No safe place, until now." Ethan gave her a small, understanding nod. He didn't say anything, letting her words sink in. He had lived alone for decades, but he knew what it meant to be without anyone to trust, without anyone to rely on. The desert was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving. He had learned to survive, yes, but survival was easier when you weren't carrying fear all the time. They sat in silence for a moment, the soft glow of the lamp filling the room with warmth. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of dry grass and dust. For a while it felt as if the world had paused, leaving only them and the quiet hum of the night. I need water," Naya said finally, her voice soft, almost hesitant. She was not demanding it, only asking. Ethan nodded and moved to the small kitchen, filling a cup from the tap and returning to her side. She took the cup with both hands, drinking slowly, carefully, as if savoring not only the water, but the safety she felt in that moment. "You're not used to staying in one place, are you?" Ethan asked, not unkindly. It was more a statement than a question. She shook her head, her dark hair falling across her face. "No, always moving," she said, "always running." Never safe. Her words were brief, but Ethan felt the weight behind them. He could imagine the life she had led, the constant fear, the need to hide, the nights spent unsure where she would sleep. It was a life very different from his, yet somehow he felt a connection. They both understood isolation, though in very different ways. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out the next step. But first, you need rest." She looked at him, and for a moment her eyes softened. "Rest," she repeated, nodding. She seemed to trust him just enough to let go of some of her tension. Ethan guided her to the spare room, a simple bedroom with a small bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the desert. She hesitated at the door, then stepped inside. "Thank you," she said again. It was quiet, sincere. "Sleep," he said, "and don't worry. I'll keep watch." For a while she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. Then she lay down carefully, pulling the thin blanket over herself. Ethan watched her for a moment, noting the rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. She looked peaceful, though the faint tension in her shoulders suggested that her mind was still racing. After a few minutes, she closed her eyes, and Ethan quietly left the room. He moved back to his bedroom, but sleep was far from his mind. The encounter had shaken him in a way he hadn't expected. He was used to the quiet of the desert, to the solitude of ranch life. But Naya's presence had brought something new, a sense of mystery, a hint of danger, and a spark of curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Ethan sat by the window, looking out at the moonlit landscape. The desert stretched endlessly, silent and vast, but now it felt different. It wasn't just a place to live. It was a place where something unexpected had happened, where a stranger had appeared, and where the course of his life might be changing. As the hours passed, he thought about what Naya had said, about being followed, about the danger she faced. Whoever was after her was clearly persistent, skilled enough to make her fear going home. Ethan knew the desert could hide many things, but it could also expose those who were unprepared. He would need to be careful. Morning came slowly, the first light of dawn brushing the peaks of the distant mountains. Ethan got up early, checking the perimeter of the ranch before Naya awoke. Everything seemed quiet, but his instincts told him not to let his guard down. He had learned over the years that the desert could be unpredictable, and that danger often arrived quietly. When Naya finally woke, she looked more alert, though the lines of exhaustion were still visible on her face. Ethan had prepared a simple breakfast: bread, fruit, and coffee. She ate quietly, her eyes darting occasionally toward the door and windows, as if expecting something to appear at any moment. "You need to tell me everything," Ethan said gently, once she had eaten. "Who's after you? Why?" "I need to understand." Naya looked down at her hands, clasping them tightly. "I cannot tell all," she said softly. "Danger, if they know more. But not safe. They come. They want control. I escape." Her words were vague, but Ethan understood the meaning. She had enemies, people who wanted to harm her or take her somewhere against her will. Ethan nodded slowly. "Then we'll be careful. You're not going anywhere alone, and we'll make sure no one finds you here." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and wariness. They spent the day quietly, moving around the ranch as Ethan went about his chores. Naya followed, watching closely, asking occasional questions about the animals, the land, and his life. She seemed fascinated by the simplicity of ranch life, the routines that had become second nature to him, and Ethan in turn found himself drawn to her curiosity, to the way she noticed small details, the way she moved carefully, almost as if she were learning not just about the ranch, but about him. As the sun climbed higher, they worked side by side, though they spoke little. The quiet was comfortable, not awkward. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond forming slowly, quietly, in the shared space of work and observation. By evening, Ethan had decided they needed to prepare for the possibility of trouble. He repaired the doors and windows, checked the fences, and made sure the animals were secure. Naya watched, learning quickly, asking questions when something confused her. It was clear she was capable, observant, and quick to adapt, a survivor. When night fell again, the air was cooler, the desert quieter than ever. Ethan kept a fire going in the living room, and they sat together in the warm glow. Neither spoke at length, but the silence was comfortable, not tense. It was a pause, a moment of peace, in a life that had been anything but peaceful for Naya. "You trust me?" Ethan asked finally, breaking the silence. Naya looked at him, her dark eyes thoughtful. "A little," she said simply. It wasn't a full answer, but it was enough. Trust, she understood, had to grow slowly. And so it had. For Ethan, the question lingered in his mind long after she had gone to bed. Trust was fragile, especially with someone whose life was in danger, whose past was unknown. But he felt a quiet determination to protect her, to help her find safety, even if it meant stepping into danger himself. Outside, the desert stretched into darkness, silent and still. Inside, two people, strangers just hours before, were beginning to understand one another, to navigate the delicate balance of trust, fear, and curiosity. The night held possibilities, uncertainties, and perhaps the beginning of a story that neither of them could yet imagine. And in the quiet of the Caldwell Ranch, Naya slept at last, knowing she was safe. For now. Ethan kept watch, alert, aware that danger could come at any moment. But for the first time in a long while, he also felt a sense of anticipation, a feeling that the night had brought something unexpected into his life, something that might change everything. The next morning, the sun rose over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Ethan Caldwell had already been awake for hours, moving through the ranch with the careful precision of someone who knew the land like the back of his hand. The animal stirred as he checked the fences and water troughs. Life on the ranch was always busy, even on quiet days, but today it felt different. There was a tension in the air, a quiet awareness that something beyond the ordinary had arrived. Inside the house, Naya was awake before Ethan could check on her. She moved carefully across the room, almost as if she were afraid of making any sound that might alert someone, or something, outside. The night had left its mark on her. The shadows under her eyes were deep, and the weariness of constant running seemed to press down on her small frame. But she carried herself with a strength that was impossible to ignore. She was cautious, but not weak. Ethan stepped into the kitchen, noticing her standing by the window, looking out at the desert. "Morning," he said quietly, trying not to startle her. "Morning," Naya replied softly, her accent still present but easier to understand now. She turned toward him, her eyes alert, but there was a hint of trust in her gaze. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and then moved toward the small table where Ethan had set out breakfast. They ate in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Ethan was thinking about the night before, the way Naya had arrived, the urgency in her voice, the fear that lingered behind her eyes. Naya, in turn, was thinking about her pursuers, about the danger that was never far behind her, and about the unexpected safety she had found in this quiet ranch. Once breakfast was finished, Ethan gestured toward the door. "We need to talk about what comes next," he said. "I can't promise you'll be safe here forever. You're hiding from people who are dangerous, and we need a plan." Naya nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. We need plan. I cannot stay. They come soon." Her voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the tension beneath it. She was prepared to move, to act, even if she didn't know exactly what to do. They spent the morning preparing the ranch. Ethan checked the doors and windows, securing each one carefully. Naya helped, moving quickly and efficiently. It was clear she had experience in handling herself, in being ready for unexpected danger. She worked silently, watching Ethan, learning, adapting. As they worked, Ethan asked, "Where are they coming from? Who are these people?" Naya hesitated, then shook her head. "I cannot tell all. Dangerous. If they know. But they want me. Control me. I escape." Her words were fragmented but full of meaning. Ethan could feel the weight of her past pressing on her, a past she couldn't share fully, but that shaped every movement, every glance. By mid-morning they had finished securing the ranch as best they could. Ethan looked at her and said, "You're strong, smarter than I expected. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Naya's eyes softened, and for a brief moment the mask of caution slipped. "Yes," she admitted. "I survive. Always survive." Her voice was quiet, but there was pride in it. The pride of someone who had faced danger and lived to see another day. They spent the afternoon in relative quiet. Ethan went about his daily chores, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and checking water supplies, while Naya watched and occasionally helped. Despite the calm, there was an underlying tension. Both of them knew that danger was not far away. The desert could hide many things, but it could also reveal them in an instant. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch, Ethan suggested they move the horses to a safer corral. Naya followed him, her movements deliberate and careful. The animals were restless, sensing the tension between the humans. Ethan noticed the way Naya handled herself around them, calm, confident, aware of their moods. She had an instinct for survival that extended to everything around her. While they worked, Ethan couldn't help but ask, "Why me? Why come here?" Naya looked at him, her dark eyes thoughtful. No one else. Far. Alone. I need safe place. I hope you help." She hesitated, then added softly, I trust, little. You kind. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Trust was not easily given, especially by someone who had spent so long running. Ethan nodded. I'll help, he said. I don't know exactly what's coming, but I'll keep you safe as long as I can. His voice was calm but determined. He had never been one to back down from protecting someone, especially someone who needed it. Night fell again, and the ranch was bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. Ethan and Naya moved inside, checking the doors and windows once more. The desert was quiet, but every sound seemed louder in the stillness. The rustle of the wind, the distant howl of a coyote, the creak of the old house settling. Each noise made Naya tense, and Ethan could feel her fear, even when she tried to hide it. They sat together by the fireplace, the flames casting shadows across the room. The warmth was comforting, but the tension remained. Ethan could see the exhaustion in Naya's eyes, the constant awareness of danger that never left her. He reached for a blanket, draping it over her shoulders. She accepted it without a word, a small gesture of trust. I need to know more about what's coming, Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. Even if you can't tell me everything, I need to know what to prepare for. Naya hesitated, then nodded. They follow. Always follow. Never stop. I hide. Far they find. I run. Always run. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. She was used to running, but even she could not hide from the fear that lingered behind her words. Ethan studied her for a long moment. We'll make sure they don't find you here, he said. We'll use the ranch, the land, everything we can. You're not alone anymore. For the first time since she had arrived, Naya allowed herself a small smile. It was brief, fleeting, but it was real. Ethan noticed it and felt a small warmth in his chest. Trust was growing, slowly but surely, between them. As the night deepened, Ethan kept watch, moving quietly through the house and the yard. Naya had fallen asleep, finally allowing herself a moment of rest. He watched the moon rise higher in the sky, casting silver light across the desert. The land was beautiful, but it was also dangerous, unpredictable. Whoever was pursuing Naya could arrive at any time. Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He would not let anyone take her. He would protect her, no matter what it took. The ranch, the land, the animals, all of it would be part of the plan to keep her safe. The night passed slowly, each sound carrying the possibility of danger. But as the first light of dawn touched the desert, Ethan felt a sense of readiness he hadn't felt in years. He had a plan, however simple, and a companion he could trust, however cautiously. Together they would face whatever came next. By morning, Naya was awake, more alert than the day before. She moved with purpose, helping Ethan with the chores and observing the ranch carefully. It was clear that she was preparing herself, mentally and physically, for whatever challenges lay ahead. Ethan watched her closely, impressed by her resilience. She was not just a survivor, she was a fighter, and he realized that she had brought something into his life that had been missing for years, a sense of urgency, of purpose, and a connection that went beyond simple companionship. As they worked side by side, Ethan knew that the peaceful life he had known was changing. The quiet desert ranch would no longer be just a home for him. It would become a place of refuge, strategy, and perhaps even friendship, trust, and understanding. The night had passed, but the challenges were only beginning, and both of them knew it. The desert sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the land, and the day began in earnest. Ethan and Naya moved together through the ranch, preparing, observing, and planning. The danger was not gone, but they were ready. Together they were stronger than they had been apart. And for the first time in a long while, both of them felt that perhaps they were not completely alone in the world. The day was unusually still for the desert. The sun burned high, sending waves of heat across the dry earth. But Ethan Caldwell and Naya moved through the ranch as if every step was measured, cautious, aware. Ethan had spent decades on this land, but today he saw it with new eyes. Every shadow, every rustle of the wind, every distant sound seemed amplified, warning of unseen dangers. Naya worked quietly beside him, moving with the same care she had shown since arriving at the ranch. She was learning quickly, observing Ethan's habits and the layout of the property. She helped repair fences, checked water troughs, and even guided some of the animals back into their pens when they strayed. Yet, despite her focus, there was a tension in her shoulders, a constant alertness in her eyes. She wasn't used to feeling safe, and every moment here reminded her that danger could return at any time. Ethan noticed it, of course. He had watched her all morning, noting the way her gaze darted to the horizon whenever a bird or a breeze stirred the trees. "You don't relax much, do you?" he asked, leaning on a fence post as he watched her work. She shook her head. "Cannot. Not safe." "Always watch," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I learn fast. Must survive." Ethan nodded, understanding more than she realized. He had spent much of his life alone, and while he had never been hunted, he had learned the value of vigilance. Still, there was a difference between being cautious in solitude and being hunted. Naya had known fear all her life, and it showed in everything she did. By mid-afternoon they had finished securing the animals and ensuring the property was in order. Ethan suggested they check the perimeter one more time. "We need to know every corner of this place," he said. "If someone comes, I want to see them before they reach the house." Naya followed him silently. The two of them moved along the edges of the ranch, checking the fences, peering over hills, and observing every shadow cast by the sun. The desert was vast, but it could hide more than it revealed. Ethan knew that better than anyone. As they reached a small rise overlooking the valley, Naya stopped suddenly, crouching low. Ethan followed her gaze and saw a faint movement far across the desert, a shadow that didn't belong. "They are here," she whispered, her voice tense. "Not far. Watch." Ethan squinted, trying to make out the figures. There were 3 of them, moving slowly but deliberately, scanning the ground as if searching for something. Or someone. Their clothes were dark, their movements practiced. Ethan's heart tightened. These were not casual travelers. They were looking for Naya. "Stay low," he said quietly. "We don't know if they've seen us yet." He moved behind a large rock, gesturing for Naya to do the same. She crouched beside him, her eyes fixed on the approaching figures. Time seemed to stretch as they watched, each second filled with tension. The figures moved closer, methodical, careful, their eyes scanning every detail of the desert. Ethan knew he had to act, but he also knew that rushing would be a mistake. They needed a plan. "We need to draw them away," he whispered. "If they find you near the house, they'll know exactly where you are. We'll split up. I'll lead them away."
Naya's eyes widened. "No, I
"Cannot leave," she said. Fear laced her voice. "You have to," Ethan said firmly. "It's safer this way. Trust me, I've dealt with trouble before." "You'll stay hidden. I'll handle them." Reluctantly, Naya nodded. She trusted him enough to follow his instructions, even though fear threatened to overwhelm her. She moved back toward the house slowly, staying low and careful, while Ethan prepared to confront the figures. Ethan stepped out from behind the rock, walking deliberately toward the approaching group. He made his presence known, raising his hand slightly in a non-threatening manner. "Hey!" he called. His voice carried across the desert, strong and steady. "You looking for someone?" The figures paused, then moved toward him. Their faces were hidden in the shadows of their hats, but their posture was aggressive. Ethan knew they were skilled, and he needed to keep them talking, keep them distracted, while Naya remained safe. "You don't belong here," one of the figures called. The voice was harsh, demanding. "I could say the same to you," Ethan replied calmly. "But I'm guessing you're not here for a friendly visit. Who are you looking for?" The figures exchanged a glance, then stepped closer, scanning the land around them. "We're looking for someone who's run from us," the same voice said. "She doesn't belong here. You're in the way." Ethan kept his tone even, careful not to provoke them. "Well, I'm in charge here," he said, "and I don't let anyone harm people on my land. If you want to take her, you'll have to get through me first." The shadowed figures hesitated, sizing him up. Ethan knew he had bought Naya some time. He glanced towards the house and saw her peeking from behind the curtains, her hands pressed against the fabric as she watched the confrontation unfold. She was tense, ready to run, but she stayed put, trusting him. Ethan moved slowly, leading the figures away from the house, keeping them distracted. He used the terrain to his advantage, leading them over rocky ground and hills, forcing them to slow their pace. The desert was his ally. He knew every hill, every hidden dip, every place to gain cover. As they moved, Ethan spoke, keeping the figures talking, buying more time for Naya to prepare. "You think you can just take someone because you want to? You don't know this land. You don't know me. You're making a mistake." The figures were persistent, but Ethan's confidence and knowledge of the land gave him an advantage. He used rocks, shadows, and small distractions to confuse them, forcing them to focus on him instead of the house. Every step he took was calculated, deliberate, ensuring that Naya remained safe. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Naya moved quietly, helping secure additional precautions around the house. She checked the animals, making sure they were calm, and double-checked the doors and windows. She could hear the faint sounds of Ethan's confrontation in the distance, the voices carried by the wind. She stayed focused, her mind sharp, her movements precise. Hours seemed to pass as Ethan and the figures moved through the desert. The sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the land. Ethan knew he had to end the confrontation soon before darkness made everything more dangerous. He led the figures into a narrow canyon, a place where he could control their movements and create a natural barrier. "Stop!" Ethan called as they entered the canyon. "This is as far as you go." The figures hesitated, unsure of the terrain. Ethan used the opportunity to move behind a rock, forcing them into a narrow passage where their numbers and skill were less effective. He could see their frustration, and he knew they were realizing that capturing Naya wouldn't be easy. Back at the ranch, Naya watched the distant figures retreat slowly. She could see that Ethan had successfully diverted them, and relief washed over her. She had never felt safe like this before, never allowed herself to trust someone completely. But now, watching Ethan handle the danger, she felt a flicker of hope. By the time the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the figures had retreated from the canyon. Ethan returned to the ranch, dusty and tired, but triumphant. Naya ran to meet him, her eyes wide with concern and relief. You did it," she said, her voice trembling slightly.
"They gone? For now," Ethan said, brushing off the dust from his clothes. "But we need to stay vigilant."
"They'll be back if they think you're still here." Naya nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I trust you," she said quietly. "You strong. You protect." Ethan looked at her, seeing both fear and gratitude in her eyes. "We protect each other," he said. "You're not alone anymore." That night, as the desert settled into its familiar quiet, Ethan and Naya prepared for whatever might come next. They checked the ranch, reinforced the doors, and ensured that the animals were safe. The confrontation had tested them, but it had also strengthened their bond. They had faced danger together and had survived. As they finally settled in for the night, Naya allowed herself to relax slightly, leaning against Ethan as they watched the stars appear one by one in the vast desert sky. There was still uncertainty ahead, and the danger was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, both of them felt a sense of hope. The desert night was still, but now it carried a promise that together they could face whatever came their way. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a place of refuge, courage, and connection. And in that quiet shared moment, Ethan and Naya knew that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. The sun rose over the Caldwell Ranch, casting warm golden light across the desert. Ethan Caldwell had been awake for hours, moving quietly through the house and yard, checking the animals and ensuring that everything was secure. Even though the shadowy figures had retreated the night before, he knew that danger could return at any moment. The desert was beautiful, but it was unpredictable, and Naya's pursuers were patient, skilled, and relentless. Naya stirred in the spare room, blinking at the early light. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel safe. The house smelled of coffee and fresh bread, simple comforts that reminded her she was alive and cared for. She sat up on the bed, stretching slowly, and glanced toward the window. The desert seemed peaceful in the morning sun, but she knew better than to trust appearances. Ethan came into the room carrying a small tray with breakfast. "Morning," he said softly, placing it on the table by the bed. "Eat something. You'll need energy today." Naya looked at the food, then at him, and nodded. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost shy, but there was gratitude in it that Ethan could feel. She picked up a piece of bread and began eating slowly, savoring the simple meal. Once breakfast was finished, they moved outside to check the ranch again. The desert was still, the wind carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and dry earth. Ethan led Naya along the fences, showing her every weak spot he had reinforced, every area where they could hide or take cover if needed. She listened carefully, absorbing every detail, learning how to move quickly and quietly across the land. "You've learned fast," Ethan said after a while, watching her. "I'm impressed. Most people would struggle with all this." Naya smiled faintly, a small, genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Must survive," she said simply. "Must know land. Must protect self." Ethan nodded, understanding her completely. Survival had shaped her, honed her instincts, and forced her to adapt quickly. But now, she wasn't alone. They were a team, and that made a difference. As the day passed, the tension in the air grew. Ethan and Naya moved around the ranch, preparing for the possibility that the pursuers might return. They gathered supplies, double-checked the fences, and made sure the animals were safe. Every step was deliberate, every action calculated. Around midday, they heard a distant sound, an unusual movement in the desert. Ethan paused, listening carefully. Naya tensed beside him, her dark eyes scanning the horizon. The sound grew louder, a faint but distinct rustle of footsteps and shifting dust. "They're back," Naya whispered, her voice low. "They come." Ethan nodded, already moving toward the house. "Stay inside. Don't come out until I say it's safe." He could see the determination in her eyes, the way she wanted to help, but he knew she needed to stay hidden. The figures appeared on the horizon, moving carefully but steadily towards the ranch. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped out, confronting them as he had the day before. "You're not welcome here," he called. "Leave now, or face the consequences." The shadowy figures hesitated, then advanced cautiously, scanning the land as they approached. Ethan kept his tone calm, but firm. "You're looking for someone. She's not here. Turn back before things get worse." The figures exchanged a glance, clearly realizing that capturing Naya would not be easy. Ethan used the terrain to his advantage, moving behind rocks, using shadows, and keeping the attackers focused on him rather than the house. Every step was calculated, every action deliberate. He needed time for Naya to prepare. Back inside the ranch, Naya moved quietly, checking the doors and windows, reinforcing the places she could. She was learning from Ethan's example, observing his strategy and adapting it to her own movements. She was no longer just a passenger in this situation. She was a participant, aware of every potential danger and ready to respond. Hours passed as Ethan and the figures maneuvered through the desert. The sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the land. Ethan knew he had to end the confrontation soon. He led the figures into a narrow canyon, using the terrain to control their movements. The canyon was tight, with high walls that limited the attackers' options. "Stop!" Ethan called, positioning himself so that they could not pass without his knowledge. The figures hesitated, frustrated by the barrier. Ethan saw his chance and moved with precision, forcing them into a position where they could not advance. Their confidence faltered, and it became clear that capturing Naya would not be simple. By the time the sun touched the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, the figures began to retreat. They had underestimated Ethan, and the advantage of the land had worked in his favor. Exhausted but triumphant, he returned to the ranch, where Naya waited anxiously. "You did it," she said softly, relief evident in her voice. "They gone for now," Ethan said, brushing off the dust from his clothes. "But we need to stay ready. They'll be back if they think you're still here. We have to prepare for that." Naya nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She had spent years running, always alone, but now she felt a strange sense of safety. For the first time, she wasn't entirely on her own. As night fell, the desert settled into its familiar quiet. Ethan and Naya worked together to reinforce the ranch, checking fences, doors, and windows. They made sure the animals were calm and secure. Each task strengthened their trust and their connection. They had faced danger together and they had survived. Finally, as the night deepened, they sat together near the fireplace. The warm glow of the flames contrasted with the cool desert air outside. Naya leaned against Ethan, allowing herself a moment of rest. He could feel the tension in her body slowly easing, replaced by a cautious sense of peace. "You trust me?" Ethan asked quietly. "A little," Naya said softly, her dark eyes meeting his. "You strong. You protect. I trust." Ethan smiled faintly. "We protect each other," he said. "You're not alone anymore." For the first time in a long while, both of them felt a sense of hope. The desert night stretched endlessly above them, filled with stars that seemed brighter than ever. It was a reminder that the world was vast, that danger existed, but so did safety, courage, and connection. The following days passed with careful preparation and quiet vigilance. Ethan and Naya worked together, reinforcing the ranch, tending to the animals, and keeping watch for any signs of trouble. Each day, Naya's confidence grew. She learned to trust not only Ethan but herself. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a partner in facing the challenges that came her way. Ethan, in turn, began to see the world differently. Naya's presence reminded him that life was not just about routines and solitude. It was about connection, courage, and the willingness to face uncertainty together. She had brought a new energy to the ranch, a spark that had been missing for years. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood together on a small rise overlooking the ranch. The desert stretched endlessly before them, calm and beautiful. Naya turned to Ethan, her expression thoughtful. "You help me," she said quietly. "I feel safe. I trust. You change life." Ethan looked at her, seeing the depth of gratitude and respect in her eyes. "You changed mine too," he said. "You've reminded me that life is more than just survival. It's about courage, trust, and connection. We face the world together now, and that makes all the difference." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the desert and feeling the quiet strength of each other's presence. The danger of the past few days had brought them together, forged a bond of trust and resilience that neither could ignore. As night fell, they returned to the ranch, knowing that the desert could hold surprises, but confident in their ability to face whatever came next. They had survived danger, strengthened their trust, and discovered a connection that went beyond fear. The Caldwell Ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a sanctuary, a place of courage, and a home where two people had found safety, understanding, and the beginning of a new life. The desert night stretched endlessly above, filled with stars, and for the first time in a long while, both Ethan and Naya felt that the future held hope, promise, and the strength to face whatever came their way. And in that quiet shared moment, they knew one truth above all: together, they were stronger, braver, and ready to face the world, no matter what challenges lay ahead.